Good morning, everyone. My name is Gary with Bitwarden, and thank you so much for joining us for our first Open Source Security Summit. We're thrilled to have everybody here. Can't wait to get started. We're going to jump right in with our keynote speaker, who is Mårten Mickos, the CEO of HackerOne and also the former CEO of MySQL, the world's most popular open source database. And so I'd like to turn it over to Mårten and have him take it away.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Let me get my stuff up and running here with you. Great to be speaking to everybody today. When the world is a level playing field, it will be much better. When it is open, it will be better. And when we work together, it will get better. These fundamental principles have changed software forever. We have the open source movement within software that started 20, 30, 40 years ago, even longer, but for real, maybe 20 years ago, and which has improved and changed software forever, for the better. We have a similar shift going on in security where we're bringing this level playing field thinking, transparency, and collaboration into security. And the best is when you do both of those together. So I'm delighted to be here today to speak to you about this topic at the Bitwarden Open Source Security Summit. So what I just said was essentially that in software, when you make the source code open, you unleash collaboration and innovation, otherwise not possible. You do things that you cannot do with software that's closed. Similarly, in cybersecurity, in information security, when you make vulnerabilities and their fixes open, meaning when you make the problems and the solutions open, you unleash collaboration and risk reduction, otherwise not possible. So a superior way of doing security, and the only one that really works, is one where you do it together. There's a bunch of companies, organizations, projects driving this. What I'm showing on this slide is just a subset, maybe the tip of the iceberg or something, but we have very strong organizations who see the value of openness, collaboration, and building a level playing field for everybody, producing open source tools that are useful for security, driving security initiatives, helping you develop more secure software, helping you secure the software that you've built, and so on. I'm the CEO of HackerOne. We represent the world's largest community of friendly hackers, of security researchers who will come to your help, look for vulnerabilities in your software and tell you about them so that you can fix them long before any criminal elements can get to it and cause damage and havoc for your system and your business. So that's what HackerOne is all about. We are the platform for all the good hackers in the world. And we by now have around 900,000 people signed up to be ethical hackers on our platform. That's more good guys than there are bad guys in that practice. That's more white hats than there are black hats in the entire world. An example of how you practice transparency in the security world is what I'm showing here, the Hacktivity feed. So you can go to hackerone.com/hacktivity and you will see that organizations who are running bug bounty programs, excuse me, or vulnerability disclosure programs are publishing the contents of the vulnerability reports and the communication for the whole world to learn from. This is the best way to share knowledge and build a pooled defense that can fight against cybercrime. Because the fact that you've fixed the vulnerability doesn't mean that all work is done. If you share the knowledge with others, you will multiply the positive effects. Others can learn and preemptively and as a preventative measure fix the same things. And there are so many vulnerabilities in the world, so that even when we fix them faster and faster and more in a more automated way, there are still millions and probably 100 million vulnerabilities to fix out there in the wild. Looking more broadly at cybersecurity, or information security as it is also called, for many people it's a new practice and it's difficult to understand how to approach it. We believe that the most rational way to look at this is that it's probabilistic risk management. There's nothing such as fully secure. There's nothing such as fully exposed. Everything is shades of gray. Everything can break. Everything can be protected. And what you try to do is lower the risk of a breach. And you do that by increasing the cost for the adversary to attack you. And when it's very expensive to break into your system, they will try on some other system and you will be safer. So it's about reducing the odds of a cyber breach, but not believing that you can reduce them to 0%. That's not possible. There's always a risk involved, but every step you can reduce it is good for you, good for your business. Information security is led often by a chief information security officer, and a little bit jokingly, we could ask, what does the C there stand for? In the old world, it often meant commanding. And in the new world, it often means collaborative. And let me show what I mean here. There was a world of cybersecurity where the principle was to keep it close to your vest, confidential and exclusive. Share the knowledge, share the findings with the smallest possible group of people so as not to be shamed or not to be blamed for any wrongdoings. In the modern world, where we bring openness to security, like we've been bringing openness to software development, the principle is to be open, transparent, and inclusive, to share the bad news and the good news, because only when you shine a light on the bad news can you really fix it. So in the old world, there was a belief that you can reach impenetrability and complete compliance, that you somehow can reach a state where the perimeter is fully defended and there's no risk at all. In today's world, we believe in a reduction of cyber risk. It can never go to zero, but it can always go down. In the old world, only certified experts were allowed to engage in security. Today, companies realize that it's something they must train every single employee on. Whether they are dealing with software development and deployment or not, everybody must have a sense for it, because we have cyber threats coming to us through all digital channels that exist. We have cyber threats in email, in text messages, in the systems we use, whether we are a user or a producer of software. So whereas in the old world, cybersecurity people were a cynical guard, today, if you work in cybersecurity, you're a business enabler, and your work is about enabling the company to conduct its business in a good way. It's to enable customers and consumers to trust you, to build trust, and thereby enable the business to grow. And whereas in the old world, you would keep people away and say it's dangerous and don't come close, in the modern world of cybersecurity, we run to the fire, not away from it. And we ask everybody to tell us and report what they see. Because when you see something, you should say something. And with all the eyes on a problem, we can learn much faster, act much faster. So what we must do in this industry broadly, not just this company, HackerOne, not just Bitwarden, every company in the whole world, we have to make security work, we have to democratize it. We have to make it a level playing field where anybody can contribute, anybody can learn, anybody is welcome to join and contribute in their own little way. Just as we've seen in open source software, how when you have a community and you allow anybody to join, they can work together and be very productive and constructive together, even when they disagree with each other, which is a key wisdom of open source communities. They are built for people who disagree, but they still work towards a goal, a common goal. And we need the same thinking and the same paradigm in security today. So we need to learn from open source, learn how to collaborate, learn how to get people who vehemently disagree to work together, learn to be open about problems, learn to do blameless root cause analysis and look for the problems, but not blame them on individual people, but just look for the problems so that they can be fixed. And in society, we must legislate cyber hygiene. It will work only when society passes laws that make sure that every organization, every company protects the data that they have been trusted to store for consumers, for other companies, for society. So therefore, The old software we have, which wasn't built with security in mind, we need to fix it, or we need to throw it away. We can't just sit there thinking that we have old software that's unfixable and therefore there's some sort of excuse for not keeping it secure. That's not acceptable. We must face the reality, and if we have old software that doesn't work, we must deprecate it, or we upgrade it and build new functionality. And we shouldn't call it software engineering when we are studying it or anywhere else, unless it contains a security aspect as well. Today, you can study computer science at many universities without taking a single course in cybersecurity. That's just plain wrong. It is so bad. We are teaching people how to build software without teaching them how to make sure it is safe and secure. And if our software isn't safe and secure, then people won't trust it. When they don't trust software, it soon means they don't trust society, because society is running on software today. If we were still living in the pre-software world and software hadn't eaten the whole world, no big deal. Like it was in the early days of the internet, for instance. In the 90s, what we did on the internet was just fun stuff that sort of didn't affect the real world. But today, everything of essence is running on software. All your personal data, your health, your society, your voting, your business, your climate change programs, whatever relates to climate, any law enforcement, any rules, any bookkeeping, accounting, anything that matters today runs on software. And therefore, we must make sure that software is strong and secure from the moment it is being designed. And to make that possible, we need to make sure that those who study software engineering learn to build safe software from the start. This we could learn from the aviation industry, where you have fantastic engineers designing airplanes or rockets or whatever, and they know that in order to even test fly a rocket or an aircraft, it has to be designed and planned with safety in mind so that they can be sure to be able to fly it. We should have the same principle in software, that from the moment we design it, we make sure that it's safe and secure enough for any consumer to trust, because otherwise trust will erode with really negative implications in society. And when I hear talk about software, I mean the broader concept of digital stuff. It could be software, it can be data, it can be your data, it can be anonymized data. It sort of doesn't matter what it is. Anything that's in a digital form needs to be built with security in mind, or otherwise we shouldn't have it. We just shouldn't have it. We built an internet now that's sort of a pretty prototype of what it should be, but it doesn't live up to the standards of security that we need to follow. So in the future, to get this digital trust in society, to have everybody feel that society functions on the digital side, which it now has to do, given COVID and the pandemic, we have no other choice but to operate the entire society in a digital way. And to make sure we maintain trust there, like we used to have in the physical world, we need to realize that we must make it a level playing field where anybody can contribute. And that means that ignoring hackers will be viewed as negligence. And hackers here is a broad term. It means anybody on the outside who has an observation or an opinion on the state of your software. And not listening to the input from the outside is negligent. So that's principle number one. Number two, security must be collaborative. There's just one way to deal with asymmetric threats, and that is pooled defense. Those who are defending need to share their best practices, work together, blamelessly analyze what went wrong so they can be fixed for the next time. And when you do that, the good side and the defenders will always win, because there's 1,000 times more good people than bad people in any society, order of magnitude. And finally, to really build trust digitally, transparency is needed. It is the only way to fully achieve trust, to be open about one's intentions, open about the weaknesses, open about how they're being fixed, open about decision making. The more transparent an organization can be, the more it can be trusted by anybody. Transparency doesn't mean sharing every secret. Transparency doesn't mean subjecting oneself to somebody else's decision making. Not at all. It just means a level of integrity about declaring what's going on and declaring how one is dealing with issues. That sort of transparency breeds trust, even with those who may disagree with you, even with those who would have done it a different way. But it's the strength to be transparent that builds trust in the world. So in summary, and as I said, I think many times here during the past minutes, that there's just one way to do security, and it is together. We need to plan together, design together, look for problems together, fix things together, share best practices together. That's how we build a digital civilization, a digital society that can truly work and that people can trust. And I'm very happy that we're working with Bitwarden on this very particular topic, looking for problems, fixing them. Because at HackerOne, we always say that bad news, that's good news, because you can fix it. Good news is no news, because news should be good. And no news, that's really bad news. Meaning when you don't know what's going on, that's really dangerous. So with that, I'll stop here. I think Kyle will join me here on stage for a quick chat about Bitwarden and HackerOne.
Yeah, thanks for the great talk, Martin, and on industry directions in the security space. It's really great to hear. My name's Kyle, and I'm the founder and CTO of Bitwarden. As some of you may know, we've had a long-standing relationship with HackerOne, having run our public bug bounty program on HackerOne over the past few years. Today, I wanted to announce that we've recently expanded our relationship with HackerOne by introducing a new private program where we've introduced bounty rewards to attract even higher quality hackers to examine the Bitwarden code base and kind of help with responsible vulnerability disclosure throughout the Bitwarden code base and things. So now I wanted to welcome Mark Miller from NASA Goddard Space Flight Center to the stage. Mark is going to share his perspective on building high velocity teams with secure shared credentials. So Mark.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Gary. This is Mark Miller. I'm here to talk to you about building high velocity teams with secure shared credentials. Before I get started, I have to state that this is all my opinion and my thoughts alone, and in no way does this talk represent the views of NASA or my employer. So who am I? I am a Linux systems guy. I have been working in IT since 1999. I started as an intern and have worked from there. Primarily, the work that I do is related to Linux systems support and keeping systems online. I keep the lights on, I keep the systems patched, I keep everything running and put out some fires when problems occur. I have done some coding support, but mostly the work that I do is about keeping systems running. I like to think of myself as an IT janitor because most of the time the work that I do is in the background, but it keeps everything running smoothly. On a personal note, I am an audiobook addict. With everything going on in the world, I have been working from home like most people. I apologize, but I don't miss my commute. I do miss my audiobook time though. Also, I am a habitual over-explainer. I am exactly the type of person who gets asked a simple question and then a few minutes later, I'm scribbling stuff on the whiteboard and I turn around to find everybody's eyes glazed over because I've just gone too far. So with that stated, let's get started. So I started in the password management space by having a need to share passwords in an organization. And all of that comes with it a need to share passwords, to share all sorts of secure information like API keys or SSH keys or key pairs, that kind of thing. Many times an organization will even need to share things like encrypted notes or documentation. Sometimes the documentation will even have the credentials inside, and it can be a challenge when you are trying to share this kind of information in a secure but still efficient manner. So ultimately, what ends up happening is you have a need for some level of organization of all of this kind of information, and it needs to be holistic. So ultimately, I'm here to talk about using a password manager and how that can make your team or operation more efficient. Passwords are here to stay. They are not going anywhere. There are just too many service accounts or API keys or other secure credentials that need to be shared within an organization in order to keep that organization operational. So what ends up happening is you need to document your passwords, but you also need to document your processes, and you need to document the procedures that sometimes this documentation will, as I said, have the passwords stored in it, which can be a real problem because passwords will end up everywhere. You'll end up with passwords in users' home directories or in that Excel file that's on the file share somewhere, or just anywhere. And that can be a real problem to solve in and of itself. And by migrating to something like a password manager, like Bitwarden, you can really do an overhaul of the entire way that you're managing those sorts of credentials. And one of the big benefits there too is that it gives you really excellent handoff. In the case that someone leaves your organization, you end up with an excellent way to transfer that information to another person in a system that really makes it efficient and fast to get everything that they need in order to have the transfer work well. So what sort of things a password manager can offer your team or organization? The best part is that it adds a process. Everybody who's in IT knows that you need processes for everything. And putting a process into your password management means that for your team, it becomes second nature. And everyone will simply start to put their passwords into the password manager in a coherent and organized fashion. And it can really improve that kind of transfer of information and knowledge. Because now when your team is involved in setting up and deploying or configuring, one of the first things that they're going to think to do is to put that information into the password manager. It really can improve the process. One of the benefits that I've found is that you can easily associate alternate credentials or information with different host names. So instead of taking a password and passing it all the way up the chain from sandbox to dev to test to QA to staging to production, all of that, you end up with completely unique and different passwords that's easy to access and retrieve and manage all the way up the chain. Even better, by giving your team a central repository in the form of a password manager, you will end up stopping the process of saving those passwords all over, the ones that are in their home directory or stored in that Excel spreadsheet or stored in the documentation or what have you. It allows you to take it all and centralize it in one spot. Even better, sometimes you may find that passwords are stored in a browser. If you're like me, I use multiple browsers, and when you're relying on the browser to store your passwords, you may end up saying, oh, I can't use that in Firefox. I have to use it in Chrome because that's where I've stored the password or something like that. Once again, a centralized system for managing it gives you one spot everywhere. So for me, my journey into the use of something like Bitwarden and password management, in our organization, we had a tool called CryptVault, which was a good enough tool. It did the job of giving us a central spot to store some passwords. However, it was in-house built and a complete custom application. It was written in Cold Fusion, and probably 15 years ago, maybe older than that even. And we had essentially no insight into how it worked. The developer had long departed. We used the tool because we needed something, but it didn't have a whole lot of features in terms of convenience. It allowed us to store passwords, and that's essentially it. It was locked in to one system, one framework, like I said, Cold Fusion, and it had an associated encryption DLL that was written for a 32-bit code base. And we could not get that DLL, to compile for a 64-bit code base when the time came to migrate away from the Windows 2008 operating system during its end of life. So we needed something to replace that. So we started looking. And the sorts of things that we expected such a replacement tool to offer, we needed to be able to support multiple users. We needed everyone to be able to use it simultaneously. Many of the solutions we found allowed multiple users to have access to the tool, but it involved things like the password file being locked when one user was in it. And we really didn't want something like that. We needed a web UI. We needed something that mirrored our existing solution in such a way that the team did not have to experience so much change that they'd stop using the tool. We needed something that really reinforced the consistency of continuing to use the password manager for everything, or else we would fracture and then have to draw all that back in, which would be an even bigger project. We needed it to be easy to use and easy to share. We needed everything about it to be as simple as the current solution, which allowed everybody access to the passwords at bare minimum. And most important, because of customer requirements, we needed to store the data on site. We could have nothing in the cloud. So that eliminated lots of contenders, because lots of the software out there for password management is emphasizing that it's in the cloud as a benefit. And for many people it is. But when you can't store any data in the cloud because of customer requirements, that can be a real negative. The other major consideration for us was cost. And when migrating from what is essentially a free solution, despite the fact that it was maintained by my team, you need something that doesn't break the bank in terms of convincing your management that it's something worthwhile. So many of the options we considered simply had too many deal breakers. The cloud option, like I mentioned, it just threw out so many different tools. Clouds offer convenience. They really do. By offloading the storage of your passwords to something like the cloud, it means that you no longer have to consider the security. You no longer have to consider the implementation or the management or any of that. But it doesn't give you control of your own local data. And for us, that was a major feature of Bitwarden. We also considered rebuilding the tool in-house, but frankly, we didn't have the security experience and didn't have the coding expertise in order to pull something like that together. Our development team was already fully committed to all of their own regular projects and didn't need to take on yet another in-house project. We also wanted something that was a little more operating system agnostic than our current environment, which was very Windows-centric. We wanted to be able to use it on Linux if necessary. We have a wide Linux deployment. We also we really wanted to simply not worry about what operating system it was running on. And again, cost was a major consideration. So rebuilding the application would have been expensive because it would have involved administrator time and it would have involved developer time. And we weren't really sure how much we could commit to that. So you will be shocked to hear, of course, we selected Bitwarden because Bitwarden met all of the requirements we needed. The web UI was fantastic. It allowed us to migrate the user base in such a way that everything worked in a very similar fashion. Even better, it allowed users to have their own personal vault and a shared organization vault that they could immediately have access to once we set them up with an account. We also had a lot of unexpected features that we weren't looking for. Like I said, the tool that we used before was very basic. Stuff that Bitwarden offered us was something like search, being able to instantly find our passwords by one simple search, either related to the username or the host name or just notes about the credentials, proved to be incredibly useful in terms of making our large collection of stored credentials accessible to all of the users who are using it. We also have a password generator now, and on top of that, a passphrase generator. So not only can we easily and quickly generate the lengthy passwords that a service account requires with the large complexity requirements, we could also generate new passwords for users who needed them reset, and if necessary, generate passphrases that are easy to communicate over the phone when you are trying to send a one-time password reset to someone. It's so much simpler that way. We also got encrypted storage. So in the case where we need to store credentials in a document, we can store it directly there. It's fantastic that way. And then on top of all of that, we have a new management backend for managing all of these users in a way that we simply never had before. It proved to be incredibly convenient for controlling who has access to which passwords and how. So the migration process from our old tool to Bitwarden, we had to do a custom database export using the existing environment to sort of fudge together a CSV file. However, Bitwarden supports direct CSV import. They have a special format directly for organizations, and that format means that we could both export the data as necessary into one CSV file, import it directly into the organization-owned password file, and that meant that all users who were in the organization already had access to all of those passwords immediately upon deployment. So that really allowed us to rapidly deploy Bitwarden into our organization without much back and forth in terms of users having access and granting access and things like that. We really never looked back at that point. We were eager to shut down the old operating system and software, and that was that. So for us, looking forward, we're really eager to make use of Bitwarden's new single sign-on enterprise integration. Our testing has shown that it works really well with Bitwarden and our single sign-on implementation, and it will allow us to fully cover any users and establish, yet again, another process for adding users, managing users, and controlling who has access. We're also considering whether or not organization devices like phones that are on site are eligible for using Bitwarden, because that would allow someone who's, for example, working in a data center to be able to call up credentials that they need when they're trying to terminal into some sort of device. We're also considering expansion possibilities. Maybe there are other people within our organization who are interested in using something like Bitwarden, and maybe that is something that we can offer to them. So really, we're really excited about Bitwarden. We're hopeful for the future. And I think using a password manager like Bitwarden can really help your team to be more efficient and more organized. So that being said, I'm going to pass it back to Gary. Thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate you.
Thanks, Mark. Hang on one second, if you would, because there was a couple questions, and we've got a minute if you're okay to
Absolutely.
answer.
Sure.
I saw one question in the chat about how you approach two-factor authentication. Maybe you could touch on that generally.
We currently have two-factor authentication available within the organization. However, we are focused more on single sign-on as a long-term option.
Another question that comes up a lot is, it's one thing when you're setting up a system for yourself, but it's another to get buy-in from the team. And I was wondering what tactics you've used with your colleagues to really get them invested in sort of what you want to put in place.
It has involved a lot of strong arm tactics. Mostly it involves the solution being in place and a lot of mumbling and groaning because change is required as part of that. And by offloading the responsibility of change, most of the time users are interested in all of this new shiny stuff. Like I said, Bitwarden offered a lot of features that we didn't have before. One of the, I mean, it's embarrassing to say it, but one of the biggest features that users really enjoyed was search, and being able to go through the hundreds of credentials that we have very rapidly was extraordinarily helpful in terms of getting people using it.
Great. I think we've got time for one more question. Back to the point where you were talking about documentation. Do you mean the password included docs being stored directly in the Bitwarden environment? Oh, yeah, maybe you could just explain a little bit about co-locating documentation and passwords together and how you approach that.
Sure. So in some cases, documentation for standing up a given service involves adding credentials, or rather involves invoking credentials. And frequently in documentation that I've used, it will say contact your administrator for the appropriate credentials for logging in, or it will be some sort of connection string that needs to be added to an application that will have credentials either redacted or dummied out in the connection string. And this allows us to create very specific documentation that is storage of the documentation with an encrypted credential. It allows us to store the whole documentation as is with the credentials in place in a way that can be secure. And that way, if an administrator needs to access the documentation, they can retrieve it directly from the secure notes associated with it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you. And we look forward to being in touch.
Glad to be here. Thank
Great.
you, Gary.
We're going to move ahead with our program now for our next segment, which is going to be a fireside chat, but more of course, an online webcast chat. And so I'd like to welcome freshman enterprise architect at RedHat, as well as Michael Crandell, the CEO of Bitwarden, to join us. And we'll let the two of them take it. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Hello, Gary.
Good morning, freshman.
Morning.
I'll let the two of you take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Gary. And thanks, everybody, for joining. I'd also like to say a special thanks to Mårten, Mickos, and Mark Miller for sharing some time this morning. And for you, freshmen, my name is Michael. I'm CEO of Bitwarden. And this is as close as we're going to get to a fireside chat during this pandemic. But why don't you kick us off? Give us a little snapshot of your background in IT and security, freshman.
Sure. So I'm an enterprise security architect at RedHat, and like Mark, today's conversation is my own opinions and viewpoints, and not necessarily that of my employer. But I love my role as an architect at RedHat. It seems like every day is a new adventure. I work across the organization. I kick over rocks and logs and try to identify potential issues that pop up, and then work with the stakeholders to address them. Whether it's trying to find a long-term strategic solution, looking at the operational or technical security means of remediation, or simply focusing on a more practical, refining a practical solution for our users and our customers. So using that knowledge, I also work on creating the modifying our existing enterprise security standards and policies that we have in place to make sure that the organization is up to date with those. Prior to joining RedHat, I've spent 20 plus years working for several global organizations, both in the public and private sectors, applying and building on the many roles that I had, whether it was looking at offensive and defensive security, customer harming, fraud and abuse, threat intelligence, social engineering, all manner of risk, and a myriad of other things that you don't talk about at cocktail parties when there's a pandemic happening. So, larger, small, I've gotten to see a lot across IT and the different ways that organizations operate. From small 4-person shops all the way up to Fortune 50 organizations, and every organization has a different culture. Every organization has a different set of security requirements, risks, and threats. And I think it's great to be able to have that diversity when looking at security and being able to see it through an entirely different lens, and a more hybrid approach to security defense, because it helps you, especially in the open source space, to be able to identify problems more easily, and come up with better solutions.
Well, kudos on that background. You've spent decades in a high stress area, as Mårten mentioned. It's all shades of gray. Let's talk a little bit about this year. 2020 has been a tumultuous year, to say the least. Massive increase in work from home, which has put extra strain on security systems. And from what we see out there in the statistics, 400% increase in phishing, major uptick in cybersecurity claims. From your perspective at enterprise ground zero, so to speak, what are you seeing most and most worried about out there between phishing, credential stuffing, social engineering, stolen credentials? What are your biggest worries there?
Can I just choose E, all of the above?
Yes, you may.
I mean, social engineering continues to be a huge issue. It's a huge attack vector for baddies, and we're seeing it's not just for email anymore, right? We've got we're getting phone calls, social engineering happening via the phone, via social media. We're seeing it in the mail. We're seeing it in our chat messages, and social engineering or social messaging apps. It's always great to get a message on WhatsApp from your president asking you if you could wire some money to some lawyer somewhere, because that always happens. But I think that is that social engineering continues to be that vehicle, right? And you start looking at 400% this year. That's huge, and it's credentials continue to be the thing that baddies want out of this. I mean, they're looking for data, but they're also looking for the credentials, and and there's probably a really good reason for that. I read something where it was, credential reuse is like 64% in the public space right now. We've got, if you're not using a password manager, I think that the average number of passwords that have to be memorized is something like 90 different credentials. There's a bunch more statistics around how we're doing this in the enterprise versus how we're doing this at home. But I think that there's a lot of carryover between the two, right? What we do, especially now with the pandemic happening and being forced to, for many to be at home, we have to wear a lot more hats. We've got a lot more personal device use and crossover. When we have organizations that only 50% of them require multi-factor authentication, or less than 40% require the use of a password manager, that adds to these types of threats that we're seeing. It doesn't help prevent these things. It just makes the situation worse.
Right. You made an interesting comment there about the fact that this problem set spans the worlds of work life and personal life. How do you think about that in terms of a solution? Do you segregate those? How do you think about personal and work, and the role of your role in helping increase the security around credential management?
So I think that it's important that we, that we bring awareness. It's got to be a collaborative effort. But I think that we need to be thinking about more than the user in the workplace. We have to think about the devices that we're using and how we're using them. In open source organizations, may have open device usage policies, right? How do we look and identify and manage the risk, but also how do we manage the user experience as well? To ensure that we're giving the users, our customers, the right tools for the job. I think that there is, to a certain degree, a layered approach that needs to happen, and awareness is certainly one thing, one aspect of that. But how do we, it needs to go just beyond awareness, right? Phishing happens. You're aware now. I mean, that's I'm going on break. We've got to do more than just be able to provide, the updates on what the latest phishing campaign is. I think that we need to be able to provide the right tools, and even providing the right tools that will overlap between personal life and work life, so that we're setting the right bar. We're setting the right standards for our users to make sure that they actually understand, and it's muscle memory for them to continue using these tools and capabilities.
Mm-hmm. I know from past conversations that you take a very practical perspective on all this. So tell us a bit more about that. What are the biggest challenges from a practical perspective?
I think it's balancing usability and security, right? We need greater transparency, and we need, it needs to be easy to use. Our users are very, very smart, right? And I hate seeing an industry where we treat the user as a lesser citizen because they fail to catch the phishing attempt or the social engineering attempt, or they clicked on the link for the ransomware and things, and it's like we let them down. Or we're giving them the tools to be able to do things, but we have our security policies and requirements in place, but we have to force them to use 5 different passwords in order to be able to get to the services and resources that they need on a daily basis. We give them password managers, but we don't allow them to use the 2FA functions to be able to store TOTP tokens within the password manager. Things like that. How do we get that right tool to the user? And how do we ensure that the process is there? I can give you an example of thinking more about the user experience and why that's important. So a number of years ago, I was working for a Fortune 50 organization that had an unfortunate, phishing breach. Credentials were compromised, and the accounts that were targeted were then used to be able to reset passwords for social media accounts for the organization. Those accounts were then defaced. It was a black eye on the brand, but it happened. And management as part of an after action said, we need phishing training, right? This all started with phishing. Somebody clicked on something that they weren't supposed to, entered in credentials. We need phishing training. So you and your team go build the phishing training. And we did, and we had all of the right hits. We had hover over links, make sure that you understand who it's being sent from. Have if you for whatever reason don't understand, or not sure whether or not this is phishing, send it to InfoSec, and InfoSec will take care of. We'll look at it and we'll let you know. All the typical stuff that you would pass as part of your security awareness and compliance training. And we did, and we put together the training, and it went out, and everyone took it and thought it was great, and it was, you know, pats on the back and handshakes all around. Awesome. And then I stopped for a second and started thinking about what we had just done, and went back to one of the VPs who was responsible for this, who was leading this effort, and said, hey, by the way, what was the email address that we used for where are people supposed to send the phishing if they find it? And he thought about it for a second. He's like, it's oh yeah, no, it's I can't remember. And so I started asking other people on the team and other people in the organization, and no one could remember. I mean, it was big enough, but no one could remember where it was to go. And I looked at that and I said, we failed, because one of two things is going to happen. After 2 minutes of looking at this, you know, Alice in accounting is you know, if she can't find the email address, is going to do one of two things: either delete the message, or is going to click on the link, or do what we didn't want them to do to begin with, because there's just an assumption that it's probably okay, but InfoSec's going to get mad with me either way. I just hope that they actually had the protections in place to be able to prevent this. And that's a really sad thing to think about. So, you know, we need to make sure that we think through the user process. Our users may be lazy to a certain extent, but they're also people that are trying to have an entirely different job and mindset than we do. And I think it's important that we incorporate them into the conversation and make sure that they understand what it is that we're asking. We understand what their needs are, and we give them something simple.
Sure, we're getting to human nature here, aren't we? Which is who we're working with. In fact, you've made a comment in the past about we don't hire for security awareness. Say a bit more about that.
Right. I mean, I would be surprised if anyone on you know, in this conference had ever seen or submitted a job description, you know, whether it's an administrative assistant or someone in accounting, you know, or HR, that listed as a required job skill, you know, must be able to generate complex credentials for multiple systems every 90 days, or, you know, has a proven track record of identifying and reporting phishing in a timely manner. Like, it just doesn't happen. But we hire these people, and they're very good at what they do, hopefully. Very good at what they do, but then we put them into new hire orientation, and we bombard them with security requirements and training, and have this expectation that they're going to you know, this should be common knowledge for them, should be easy for them to pick up without the tooling. So I think, you know, human nature, we need to, you know, it's not something that everyone grasps immediately. And again, I think that it's the seeing organizations with zero tolerance to 3-strike policies for phishing, for things like phishing, that is constantly being trained, I think is also can be a bit scary, because we're almost treating them like the first line of defense, first, last, and only line of defense. If we don't have appropriate tools in place to be able to push them and help them feel like they are not the only ones involved in this journey, I think that's important.
Right. That's right. You've said before that we shouldn't see the user as the only line of defense in this whole picture.
Single point of success. Correct.
Good. By the way, did you ever find a solution to the phishing email, the difficult to remember phishing email problem?
So one of the things that I suggested about that is, you know, I went back and why in the world do we not have a button, right? Why in the world do we not have an easy point and click solution to, you know, we have a message, this looks dodgy, I want to be able to pass this over to my InfoSec team. I want to be able to pass this to, you know, whatever my mail service provider is. If I'm not, you know, working in a small business, you know, and I'm leveraging Google or Microsoft, how do I get this message into a solution that's already existing and advertised, to make sure it's a part of my organization's workflow, my security team's policies, and see whether or not I'm right. Instead, what I've seen is I've seen solutions where, you know, we have a number of small companies that do produce toolbars and things like that, but we have solutions right now that you pay big money for, that will modify links within emails, do a bunch of things and validation on the back end, create gamification for our users, and it's all in an attempt. Like, I don't think that they've thought through, and in the conversations I've had with them, they haven't thought through the user experience in that workflow. How are we encouraging people to click on links, right, by doing this? And if they do click on the link, what's the ramifications within the organization? This is all within the battle space of an attacker. The attacker controls the body of the message. And if we're incorporating ribbons and things and modifying links, and we're creating muscle memory for our users, that I think is counterproductive to what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So I've worked with organizations and say, look, I think that this is the direction that we need. And I think it's just a matter of time now. That more organizations and more security professionals need to start asking that question. Why don't we have this? Why aren't we thinking about the user experience?
Very much in the line of what Mårten Mickos was talking about with democratizing security, and everybody has their small part to play. Last question is, what do you see for 2021, or rather, what would you like to see? What are your priorities, and what would you like to see in the security industry?
As we continue to build out and bring more people along for the open source journey, I think that it's important that we make sure that the secure user experience is a part of that. You know, continue to educate, continue to encourage people to think about using multi-factor authentication, continue to think about how we interconnect all of these different capabilities, and think about, you know, what's the long-term user experience going to be as we change multi-factor options, or as we look at trying to detect, you know, phishing or secrets or things. Open source, you know, source code management, you know, continues to be a target now. It's not just, you know, intellectual property of closed source organizations. We need to help educate the communities to push this further, and think about as well interconnected devices. You know, that hybrid work environment, to bring your own device, and how we through open source can better secure that. So that's my hope for 2021. We'll see.
Amen. Amen. Freshmen, may it be so. We'd like to see that too. So with that, I think we're coming up against the end of our section. And Gary, I'll hand back to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Freshmen. Fantastic to hear your thoughts and comments. There were a lot of nice comments in the chat about the candid conversation. Thank you, Michael. We've reached the intermission stage. So once again, I want to thank all of our speakers for the morning sessions. This is a good time to get up, stretch, take a break. Our next session will begin at 8:20, which is in 20 minutes from now. That's Pacific time. I'm in California. Thanks, folks. We'll see you in a few minutes. Thanks again for joining this morning. I hope you're having a good time. We're going to jump into our next session, which is an engineering roundtable panel. Devin Weed from Bitwarden is going to host that, so we'll get her on stage, and then I will drop off and see you at the end of the program. Take it away, Devin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the engineering panel. My name is Devin Weed. I'm a member of the Bitwarden marketing team, and I will be your moderator for the next 20 minutes. Also joining me on today's panel, we have Bitwarden engineers Chad Scharf, Addison Beck, and Matt Gibson. And to start, we'd love for each of you to just go ahead and introduce yourselves so people understand who they're speaking to and listening to today. So Chad, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So my name's Chad Sharp, Director of Engineering here at Bitwarden. Been with the company since March. And really what I do here is try to organize and lead both the engineering, development, quality, and DevOps efforts through both channel through the community and internally here as we work on our products. I'll hand it over to Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. My name is Matt Gibson. I am the newest software engineer at Bitwarden. I've only been here for about a month, but I'm ramping up pretty quick. And what I do is just improve product and implement new features. It's been a ton of fun so far. And yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to all of you. Addison, you're up.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Addison Beck. I'm a software developer with Bitwarden out of Atlanta, Georgia. I've been with the company since August, and my primary responsibilities are just churning out everything that's on the roadmap that I'm sure you guys will be hearing about in just a second. So excited to be here and talk about Bitwarden. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, I'll be asking each of you questions based on some of the trending topics that we're seeing in password security space, along with some best practices. So let's go ahead and jump into the first question since we only have just over 15 minutes left. Now, there's a lot of buzz lately, and we've already heard some of it today, about passwordless authentication and that passwords are dead. Chad, from your perspective, what does the future of authentication look like?
Sure. Well, I always love this question. Got to give it a little thought before I answer. But really, for the last 15 years, I've been hearing articles and stories, prominent security researchers and technologists coming out and stating that passwords are going away, passwords are dead. And there's many new promising technologies, techniques, things that are promising to usurp passwords. But at the end of the day, really it boils down to, I don't think that's going to happen. Or if it does, it's going to take a very long time. So given that, we still have companies using Windows XP, companies running mission critical applications on AS400s and mainframes. And these technologies are 40 plus years old. The cost of upgrading, implementing new technologies, and doing those things can be prohibitive for a lot of organizations, especially ones in larger enterprises that have sweeping numbers of internal tools and other things. That transition is going to take a long period of time. And in the meantime, you have passwords. Until we get tokens, biometrics, and other types of technologies readily in the hands of everyday users, and all technologies, platforms, operating systems, devices are capable of utilizing those in a seamless way that's easy for the user. Ultimately, at the end of the day, passwords are still going to provide what we need in terms of security, or at least the best overall compromise between ease of use and security. Of course, there's lots of ways to make those better, but most of the technologies I've seen over the last 15 years that were supposed to replace passwords have really acted as maybe multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentications to be used in addition to passwords, such as single sign-on, et cetera.
Yeah, that was a great response. And I'd love to hear if Addison or Matt, if either one of you have any different thoughts or considerations for this topic.
No, I totally agree. Ultimately, you need a backup for all these things, and you need a very basic way of allowing cross-platform accessibility. So, like Chad said, passwords are an excellent middle ground where it hits all the right things. They're fairly easy to remember. They're secure, and yeah, there's a lot of promise with other things, but it's going to take a long time to implement them.
Absolutely. It's so ingrained in our society as well. So that was a great point. Now, another very hot topic, zero knowledge encryption. Matt, how would you describe the best use case and of the best use of end-to-end encryption, and more specifically, how Bitwarden end-to-end encryption protects user data?
Sure. So end-to-end encryption is a concept where data is encrypted at the source, and maintained in an encrypted state throughout its entire life cycle until it's decrypted, where it's ultimately consumed. And Bitwarden is built from the ground up to do this. So all of our clients don't ever communicate anything that is not encrypted to the server. So everything is encrypted before it's sent up. It's stored on fully encrypted disks. It's stored in a still encrypted state in our databases, and it's only decrypted once clients pull it down and decrypt it themselves. So that's really the definition of what end-to-end encryption is. And as for zero knowledge, zero trust, things like that, those are ways of, they're security concepts in guaranteeing that you don't necessarily need to expose information in saying, yeah, I know that fact, or there are protocols to make sure that you don't have to expose anything when you're doing these kinds of handshakes. And at Bitwarden, zero trust is implemented through us not storing any kind of information that will unlock your private keys. So your master password is the key here. There's obviously some more stuff behind it, but we can't unlock that key and use it unless we get the master password. So while those things are stored, ultimately it's entirely secure, and it's up to you to expose that information effectively, for Bitwarden's case, to yourself. But that's what end-to-end encryption looks like at Bitwarden.
Absolutely. The word trust has just been coming up left and right today, and I can't thank you enough for really nailing that point, especially when it comes to just the trust of software. That was a big topic earlier in Martin's Mickos presentation, and with all online security risks at an all-time high, that's just getting more complicated. So what can individual people be doing to keep their data secure? And I'd love to hear from you, Addison. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd say that a lot of people, even in organizations and things that are carrying sensitive data, are still kind of missing out on a lot of the basics of this kind of privacy stuff. I've worked with people that used 2 passwords for everything and stored them in text files on their desktop, things that are just completely unsafe. I think that there's a lot of simple tools that you can leverage just in your browser through browser extensions that you can use to limit ads and trackers and things like that, or just not sharing very sensitive information about yourself online. The same person that was storing passwords in a text file was using his mother's maiden name as security quality. He was proud of all of these things, that's how I know about them. He thought that it was just great that he was fulfilling all of these tropes. But it really just, it was putting him at risk. And you can take these simple tools to great extremes that would just cover almost any use case. Just in your browser, you can turn cookies off completely. Most of the web probably wouldn't be super fun after that, but you can turn off JavaScript and completely block out any kind of, pretty much, a lot. And people miss a lot of these tools that don't require a lot of technical knowledge that they can implement to keep themselves more secure.
Absolutely. Chad, what are some best practices around password security specifically?
So password security, outside of common sense, which goes out the window when we talk about password security, because it's an ever-evolving landscape, right? You asked me 10 years ago, a 6-character password with a number in it was probably the most secure thing I could think of, where today we're being told completely different standards as we approach that. We want long passphrases that are maybe easy to remember, but difficult to guess. Large amounts of complexity and randomness in your passwords. It's a concept called entropy, which is more of a physics term, but when it comes to passwords and security and encryption, you really want to create something that's incredibly hard to guess, and the longer the better. That means it's going to take a computer longer to guess it, or brute force attack it, or come in through different what are called side channel attacks, etc. So really, when it comes to password hygiene, one, the password you choose should be complex and long. How do you do that? With tools that generate passwords for you, can generate the level of complexity that you want. And then you need to remember those, which is, I know for me, impossible, because my memory is maybe 5 seconds at best. I'm lucky to remember what I walked into the room for when I walk into it. So password managers are a great way to do that. And then never reusing your passwords, because password reuse is one of the other things. Well, I've got this one password, it's complex, and I remember it, so I'm proud of it. I'm going to use it everywhere, so I don't have to guess what my password was for my bank versus logging into my work email. So those are the two kind of big ones, and password managers definitely help with both of those scenarios.
Absolutely, and it's pretty fascinating when you think about the volume of people who are aware of the risks of reusing passwords, but continue to do so because of the complexity of trying to remember them and accessing your security solutions or your software solutions, at a drop of a hat when you need them. And so, adding an additional layer of complexity is concerning, but you need to take the management out of password management. So when we're thinking about adding an additional layer of security to the login process, multi-factor security options, what do those look like, Matt?
Yeah, I also just want to add on to the password thing. It's funny that we have so far 2 requirements, and it's already not tenable for a person to remember, right? I think Freshman was saying that the average person needs something like 60 passwords. And that it's not possible for someone to have good high entropy passwords and to every single thing, and they're all different. So at that point, a password manager really is absolutely necessary. But the one thing about passwords is that if you have a good one, it should be fairly static. And it's also, in some case, you're trusting whatever the password is for to store that in a secure manner. I think we all are aware of instances where that didn't happen. Passwords were stored in plain text, and hacks and breaches happen, and huge data dumps of millions of passwords also occur. Sarah pointed out a very famous one that apparently happened in 2017. And the way to prevent that is to have more than just your single static password. So that's the concept between multi-factor authentication or 2-factor authentication. I guess it's called multi-factor because, hey, maybe you have 3. But really what this is having a single-use password that, or single-use proof that increases your long-standing password to something that is completely random and generated for that one logon. So the way that Bitwarden supports this is through time-based one-time passwords, YubiKeys, which are little devices that you plug into USB, or some of them have near-field communication capabilities. FIDO keys, which are similar. We work with Duo that can produce 2-factor authentication in a number of ways. And then the last way that Bitwarden could do it is through sending an email and effectively having a one-time use URL that you can click on and validate who you are. So all of these things are ways to not only have your password protecting you, but then also something that is like totally random, and whoever wants to get in your account has to not only know your password, but they also have to have access to this other physical thing. They have to have some special knowledge. They have to do something more than just have gotten your password somewhere.
Absolutely. Addison, what would you add to that?
I actually was just thinking that I learned this from the Bitwarden community, but there's sort of a 3-step authentication method that I've been considering implementing in my own Bitwarden vault, where people will write out their password and then have their own sort of random string. It could just be as short as a TOTP code, and they will not put that in the cipher entry in their vaults, and just keep it in their mind, and then autofill from Bitwarden and append the short, easily memorizable string at the end, and just completely, even if end-to-end encryption wasn't a thing, we would have no idea what your actual passwords were. And if you pair that with our TOTP generation, it seems very, very safe.
Absolutely. Chad, do you have thoughts on what the future of 2FA looks like?
Wow, I mean, it's really expanding. We've seen a lot kind of go into the way of biometrics, everything from email magic links to physical devices. I think what I've seen across the industry through the FIDO Alliance and some of the other great things going on through that, I believe we're going to find more and more proof of identity through multi-factor, through tokens, whether those are physical tokens, an actual device, converting your phone to a token. which has its own level of authentication to use for such. The sky's the limit from there with the types of things that they're working on and doing. And although, I'd never get one, to be clear, I'm sure, the folks lining up to get implants or other crazy stuff that will read, body biometrics or other things like that. So there's a bunch of different branches and arms going out there, but really time-based tokens that can sync up to a server, they can work offline. They're predictable enough so they work, and they have some known shared iteration between them, so you can do authentication with it, but not so much that you can guess what the next value is going to be, for example. And that's kind of where we see the trend heading at the moment.
It's really interesting. And when we're thinking about cross-platform devices, that just adds a lot of complexity as well, ensuring that the information is secure on your mobile devices, on your desktop devices, on your laptops. And it's really complicated for organizations, especially to secure that infrastructure across all employees. So what are some best practices for organizations that are just starting to dip their toes into password security? Obviously, 2FA is one element to it, but ensuring that all of their employees are leveraging good password hygiene is a difficult problem to solve. So as we're nearing the end here, I'd love to just hear your thoughts and feel free to either any three of you to go ahead and jump into this. But what are best practices for organizations to ensure that their employees are taking advantage of these best practices?
Well, to kind of start off, and then I'll let the other two guys jump in here. Really, and Freshman brought this up, it's a great point, is treating your users as first-class citizens, right? So enterprises have to be cognizant of what's going to be adopted within their organization. What are people actually going to use and do? As you start pushing policies, especially like you must do X, you have to make it easy for that person to do it, and at a level of capability and technical capability that not everyone in an organization is going to have. Not everyone works for a Silicon Valley software or startup, right? So, keeping those things in mind, choosing a password manager that has password generators that can enforce policies, that can walk folks through what they're doing, that makes autofill and other things easy and sharing relatively straightforward, I think is probably one of the lowest barriers to entry to getting an enterprise-wide kind of password solution in your organization. Absolutely.
But also getting those users to leverage those and to align to those policies can be difficult. Addison, what are your thoughts on user adoption?
I think that a great way to kind of get users involved and interested in this product is just to show them that they can use it personally too. Well, there is a policy coming up that we're implementing that would restrict usage of a personal vault optionally. Most of our organizations seem okay with letting users just use Bitwarden for storing their own personal passwords too, and it's completely isolated from anything that's saved in an organization collection or anything like that. So I think that if you just show the product to people in your organization and say, hey, go just put your Google password in here, and maybe use the generator to change it and just see how much more secure you feel. When I first started using a password manager and the first password that I changed was my Google password, it felt really good to change that to a 99 character, like random string. I was like, no one's getting into this ever. I think that's a great way to just really sell the product, is to help people use it in their personal lives to feel more safe.
That is such a great response, and I completely agree. Personally, I understand exactly what you mean by that, and understanding the value in your day-to-day. It makes it so much easier to apply that during the workday as well. Now, we do only have 1 minute left, so I want to go ahead and give Matt anything else you'd like to add. Please feel free as we near the end here. Do you have anything else you'd like to point out?
Definitely. For organization adoption, to me, the biggest thing is education. And like Addison pointed out, pointing out how it actually simplifies your life. The key, the reason I'm at Bitwarden is because it does something that's incredibly important, and it does it in a way that makes your life simpler and better. It's it's a home run. So I think that we all have been battered with like password rules, and we like technically understand why you need strong passwords. Like everybody thinks through the ramifications of what could happen, but treating users like actual people and going through some actual empathetic education is not something that I've experienced. You kind of have to figure out why this is important for yourself. And unfortunately, sometimes that means that you're completely locked out of things. Maybe somebody steals your identity, all that kind of stuff, the horrible things that can happen to people. But going for more of a personal, kinesthetic almost training for how to use these things and why you should, I think can improve adoption a lot. Once people realize what's at stake, they're going to want to secure their stuff.
You're so right about that. And while we are at the end here, I encourage everybody who's listening today to check out our community forums, because that is where a lot of our engineers hang out, like these guys, and you can engage with them, ask questions, or suggest a feature for our feature roadmap. So on that note, Chad and Elizabeth Baer, a member of our marketing team, will be leading the next session. So we'll go ahead and get ready for that transition. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much for your time. This was awesome.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. I'll go ahead and leave the room. And we'll welcome back Gary and Elizabeth.
Hey, Chad.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hey. I am super excited to jump into our next session. I think it'll be really relevant to everyone that's listening today. You're going to talk about kind of the industry trends that we've been seeing, and then kind of where we are and where we're going moving into 2021 with password security. And let's leave a few minutes at the end to address some questions that we're getting in the chat. I see some questions coming in about features that are coming, so I'd love to get a chance to address those at the end. So without further ado, go ahead, and I think you have some slides for us, so I'll let you share your screen.
I'll do. Thank you. So yeah, I just wanted to, as Elizabeth mentioned, and thank you for that, kind of touch on what's really coming in password security for 2021, what we're doing around that, and give a glimpse into our thought process, both as an engineering organization and as a company itself as we look towards the future. So really, as we look at the different topics that I want to cover, there's kind of two overarching themes as we look at industry trends, and what folks need to really get, as we talked about some of these earlier, they came up in previous sessions. The themes are usability and adoption. So when we talk about without ease of use, people won't use it, right? Simple as that. So unless you have something that's usable and that people want to use, they feel secure using, they're not going to, and that impacts security. And then adoption. So when we talk about organizations, maybe it's your family, maybe it's someone who you're trying to get to have better password security. They want to use the solution. It needs to be adopted quickly and frictionlessly. So I know one of these lends itself to the other, but as we talk of them, they really are distinct in some areas. So moving on to the first topics, we talk about access and sharing. So before I get in a little bit about how we're addressing this, part of that entire adoption and usability theme, and really usability here, is how do I easily share secrets? How do I access those secrets, whether they're passwords, files, other secure data and information that I need? And then how do I work through that in, say, an organizational setting or a personal setting, maybe with family, friends, maybe with coworkers or within a team? All of those things need to lend themselves naturally to human behavior. So what we're really looking at here is how we can impact sharing, how we can impact using Bitwarden, for example, as you switch between organization use or personal use, emergency access or survivability, all about how we can help folks who have more and more of our digital lives online, more and more of our lives, period, online, especially as been mentioned before with the pandemic at hand. Almost everything we do now is on a digital world, digital device. We're grocery shopping on our phones, you know, things like that. What happens to your accounts, to your personal information, other things in an emergency? So those are some of the topics that we're looking at over the next years. We look at things like emergency access, account takeovers, app profiles, etc. And then also along the adoption theme, enterprise management is going to be one of the things we're looking at over the next year in 2021. Managing an enterprise organization's vaults. There are myriad reasons within a company or organization you need to share accounts, share passwords, share keys, and other types of information securely. And with that, and when we talk about compliance, another big topic of 2020 and 2021, especially on the heels of new laws and regulations like GDPR and CCPA, auditability, reporting, and traceability through what you're doing are also important while maintaining security and privacy. And then for enterprise managers, administrators, within organizations, you really need things to be easy. Like, you're not going to want a tool handed to you that you have to spend hours figuring out how to set up, how to use, doing things manually, and trying to find things. So usability is a big point there. And then organizational controls. I believe policies got brought up during the roundtable, and a couple times when we talk about companies really need to drill into granular permissions and better controls, or I like to call it rails, or the bumper guards in the bowling alley, right, around what your employees and users are doing to ensure they're safe without them really having to think about it. And so, as we mentioned during 2FA and some of the other industry trends, biometrics is a big thing coming up. At Bitwarden, we've recognized this. And while passwordless authentication is growing in demand in the marketplace, we notice more and more people have access to equipment and devices that support biometrics. So your phones, your laptops now are shipping with, you know, face recognition stuff through your camera, or fingerprint scanners. So recognizing this and recognizing the landscape, this is something we're looking at expanding. We have a little bit of this in place today. We're going to look at expanding this and really making this a bigger part of our usability feature and onset. And again, an eye back towards some of those organization controls. Most of these things within a corporate setting will be have controls and policies and other things in place to ensure their safe use. And then accessibility. I think this lends really well to the usability theme. It's something where here at Bitwarden, we take accessibility seriously, but we support so many different clients, operating systems, platforms, et cetera. It's easy to miss things here and there. So as we go through and start auditing our systems and start having an eye towards usability for our users that either are using assistive technologies, maybe fine motor movement or dexterity issues, or other compromised situations, who need to use keyboard navigation and controls within their workday or whatever they're doing. And then one of the most often neglected one are slow or no connectivity scenarios for those who need online data or access to things, who can't connect to the internet, or, you know, they're at the airport and we know how great Wi-Fi is there. Not that too many people are at airports nowadays, but with all that being said, these are some of the areas we really focus on WCAG, and those are the accessibility or provisions for folks with needs around accessibility standards that runs in line with other governmental and legal standards throughout the world, kind of align themselves with the WCAG's A and AA standards. So we'll be looking at shoring up our clients and solutions to adhere to those and provide better accessibility across the board. And then integrations. So I don't think you can look many places today, whether it's on the internet, across various apps, platforms, desktops, devices, where integration is not a giant topic. So we're constantly looking for areas and ways that make sense, where as a company, we can design our product to work with others in a way to provide, whether that's secure sharing or encryption or automation or working through cloud environments, et cetera. So there's plenty of opportunities out there for that, and we're going to be really holding a magnifying glass up to various points of integration we can start to tackle in the next year. And then deployment options. I know for those of you who are self-hosting Bitwarden, interested in self-hosting Bitwarden, and who have experience deploying or self-hosting any software for that matter, deployment options are important, and control over your environment. So we've really heard a lot of feedback from the community, and as we narrow in our focus from a DevOps perspective in the coming year, we'll be looking at consolidating our deployment model and our footprint of the application, looking at cloud native deployments, using your own VPCs and resources within your clouds or your company's cloud resources, choice of database. I know this is another huge ask that's on our radar that we were planning to start looking at in 2021, being able to use MySQL or Postgres or some of these other database platforms, whereas today Bitwarden is self-hosted on SQL Server. So all these and more we're going to be looking at kind of expanding on in the next year. So that's a very quick and kind of brief overview of some of the trends and things that we've recognized from the community and in industry for the coming year, and ways we're researching and looking at addressing that as a company and as a product. So with that, there's several resources here that can absolutely help view what we're doing. We have our community roadmap posted up there. Of course, we're on GitHub. Everything we do is open and out there, source code and all, as well as the discussions. You'll see exactly what we're working on and how that's coming. Now you can always tweet at us at Bitwarden if you have questions, concerns, or anything you want to discuss with us. And then we have the Bitwarden blog with plenty of good industry news, upcoming trends, and news about the company, of course, and the product. So with that, I wanted to say thanks and open it up for any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. That was a great 30,000-foot overview, if you will, of what's coming up next. Hopefully 2021 will be a little bit easier than 2020, I'm hoping. We do have a couple of questions in the chat that we have a couple extra minutes, so I think we should address. Someone asked, what is your perspective on SSO where the IDP has MFA versus Bitwarden login with MFA for a small company?
Sure. So I think either work. And if you're using a single sign-on in that scenario and you've already gotten multi-factor authentication for your IDP, and for those listening in, IDP is the identity provider, so the controller of the identity. That is probably well suited because you're using that for more than just Bitwarden. So Bitwarden SSO, we also have a policy that allows you to force SSO. So your users must come in through SSO. And while they still need a master password to decrypt their vault, that way you can enforce MFA through your own IDP, and you don't need it again on the Bitwarden vault because the Bitwarden vault will be enforcing the SSO requirement that your users come through your IDP in order to authenticate.
I think that just naturally leads into a common question that we get about, is there ever going to be a way where someone can just authenticate into Bitwarden using SSO and not have to enter their master password?
Sure, and that is something we're exploring, or ways that we can pass a known secret from the company or through the IDP, right, that acts as your master password. That requires special considerations, things like encrypted assertions, part of that end-to-end encryption cycle, areas where we need to consider maybe back channel checks or back channel communication, where we get the assertion and then we have to go talk to back to your IDP to validate you or get a secret that wasn't posted in the assertion. There's different ways to think about that, and it is something we're looking into. It's something that has been brought up quite a few times, understandably.
Oh, we got a question in. Any thoughts on unofficial servers like Bitwarden_RS.
So thoughts as an open source, platform, absolutely have other folks in the community who I think Bitwarden RS specifically was born out of the desire to be able to run Bitwarden without SQL Server. And as I mentioned, optionality is something we're really pressing towards. So while I'd love that Bitwarden provides everything that it needs to for everybody, I don't think that's true of anything except for maybe pizza. But aside from that, those alternate solutions, the only thing I caution about those is while they work for the most part, certain functionality, new features, especially for our company or organizations looking to roll out a password manager. Bitwarden is backed by a full professional team of maintainers, developers, engineers, security researchers, and folks making sure that what we produce and put out there for everyone in the community and for our customers is top-notch and fully compatible with the Bitwarden official clients.
Thanks for addressing that. I think that's all the time we have today for questions. As always, we recommend you join us in our community forum. There's tons of discussion going on there. We also have an active Reddit community that loves to chat about all things security, all things open source. And if you have a pressing question that needs to be addressed, I'd love to have anyone join us. We have weekly demos on Wednesdays, as well as Vault Hours, which are kind of our version of office hours. And I think we have one coming up in a couple weeks. I'll drop it in the chat when I find the date. And that's a great time to bring your questions, and we'll have more time to address them there. So thank you, Chad, for all your time today. Thanks for the panel. Thanks for this discussion about the roadmap. I think now Gary is going to come back to send us off and say a farewell.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth, Chad, and to everybody who's participated today. It's been a lot of fun. I hope everyone in the audience got as much out of it as we did in terms of hearing the different opinions and so forth. I wanted to finish with a special thank you that, see if I can share this on the screen. We're going to be opening a pop-up shop for the holiday season. And so we've got free items for everybody who joined the conference today, t-shirts, hats, and so forth. You'll get a chance to pick something out. We do need to ask people to stay a little bit patient. As you can imagine, with the holiday activities, shipping and so forth can be a little bit tricky. So for everybody who attended, keep an eye out for your email for the Bitwarden pop-up shop. It'll happen sometime in the next week or two. That'll include a coupon code where you can pick a t-shirt or a hat that works for you. So with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thanks to everybody for joining today. We really had a great time. We hope to see you again in the future at any of the events that we do. And I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the week. Thank you so much. Take care.